Hi, this is Ruth. Welcome to this week's video, and if you are new to my channel, it's really nice to have you here. And today the topic of our video is all about empathy. So in recent weeks and recent times particularly, working out ways that we can listen to each other, we can learn from each other, and we can become more emotionally intelligent people that can be in cooperation with others has seemed really, really important. And so I felt like empathy would be a great topic for this video. And empathy is something that we cover a lot in counselling, so particularly the person-centred theory of counselling, which was founded by Carl Rogers. Empathy is one of the key conditions that is needed for that therapeutic relationship to grow with a client. And if we take that out of the counselling room, empathy is equally needed to grow relationships out in the real world, relationships with our partners, relationships with work colleagues, relationships with our children. So it's a really, really important skill. And I actually heard someone recently talking about the fact that to really tackle a lot of the issues that are happening at the moment in the world, that we actually don't need more intelligent people in that sense of people that know facts and know things about things. We really need to have a lot more emotional intelligence in order to really understand each other and to live side by side with the billions of people that we share this planet with. So empathy is a big topic, and in this video I want to cover 6 tips. So there are 6 different ways that you can really grow empathy, and we're going to dive into those once we've done a little minute or two just around finding out more about what empathy is. It's a word that I'm sure you've heard bandied around a lot, and you might be thinking, well, what exactly is it? Is it like sympathy? Does it mean being kind? And empathy, to me, the most basic definition of it is to really think about walking in somebody else's shoes, that old saying of walking a mile in someone else's shoes, or put yourself in their shoes. So it differs from kindness and it differs from sympathy in the sense that we want to offer people warmth and we want to offer people a safe space, but we are not doing it from our point of reference of how we feel and how we see the world and from our experiences. We're really trying to step into the world of the other person, and that is what makes empathy different to those other things like kindness. So empathy is really kind of paying attention and absorbing ourselves into somebody else's world and trying to use the skills that we've got to really listen and learn and educate ourselves and experience what the other person is experiencing. And a good example, I think, of this is 2 people on paper can have had very similar experiences. So for example, I lost a parent to cancer, and I have other friends who lost a parent to cancer, and obviously that shared experience at some points in the discussions of that and me supporting that person, that may come into play that I've had a similar experience. But it's very important for me to remember that my experience of that similar situation is going to be very different to that friend's experience, because we are unique people. We have our own relationships with those other people. We have our own personalities. There are all kinds of nuances that have gone on in those 2 situations that do make them different. And if I don't have that empathy and I'm just coming at it from, oh, I know how that feels, oh, that happened to me and it felt like this, I felt angry, say, I'm really losing the opportunity to actually understand what it feels like for them, because I'm layering my own experiences onto it. So we really don't have to, and it can actually be a hindrance to have experienced similar things to someone to offer them empathy. So you don't need to have experienced racism to be able to have empathy and understand from that point of view what somebody has been through that has experienced racism. Just like a man can understand and offer empathy for a situation I've gone through of discrimination of being a woman. So it really is a beautiful, broad way of understanding how another person feels. And so that's really the at the core of empathy. And it's something that through our our natural instincts as human beings, obviously there's different arguments, and that's another video about, is life survival of the fittest and all about competition? If it was, we wouldn't have made it this far and be where we are now in evolution. Cooperation and that element of us being able to work together and share skills is a really key part of what makes us human. When we are in our family unit as children and we are in the womb and then we come out into the world, we are cared for. We're primates, we're pretty much monkeys. We care for our young, and we show them love, and we show them kindness, and we offer them all of those things. And in those first couple of years of life, it's kind of like the seeds for empathy are planted, and the better care and the smoothest, sort of most loving environment that child has creates a really good fertilized soil for that empathy to start to grow those seeds of empathy. But that doesn't mean that if we didn't have that as a child, a young child, that empathy can't grow. And equally, it doesn't mean that if we did have that as a child, that we can just think our empathy's sorted and we don't need to worry about it. I see empathy as a skill, it's like brushing your teeth, or it's like working out at the gym. We can build muscle and we can work on it, but if we stop that work and we don't continuously kind of put it into action, then our teeth get dirty, our muscles will shrink. And so empathy is really something which is in our power to cultivate and in our power to bring more of into our lives. And that's where the top tips really come into play. So let's start with what kind of things, if you're thinking, oh, empathy sounds great, I don't know how naturally empathic I am, I need to do some work on this, or you're just really seeing how important empathy is and you want to be able to hear the story of someone who has suffered racism and oppression, and you feel like you don't know how to really educate yourself and to absorb yourself in those stories and gain an understanding, empathy is a great place to start. And it's not just about racism or sexism or any of these things. It's also just about every aspect of our lives, from having a better relationship with your husband or raising children who are more empathic. There are so many different benefits. So number one top tip that I've got is to be really curious. So children are naturally curious. They've got their head stuck in everything. I've seen kids, they're just like in the cat food bowl, like, oh, what's this? And no, don't eat cat food. But they're so curious and they're not afraid to get things wrong. So they're kind of not afraid to ask someone. Often kids, if they see someone in a wheelchair, they will ask them, oh, why are you in that chair? What happened to you? Why have you got that mark on your face? Why do you talk like that? Children will say things that as adults we just wouldn't say. So the idea of kind of cultivating more of that curiosity and not being afraid to get things wrong, which is really important now more than ever. We can't learn and grow and educate ourselves if we're always afraid of saying the wrong thing and not getting everything straight away. So just to be curious about other people's lives, a little bit like when we read a novel or we're reading a book and we totally absorb ourselves in somebody else's story, and we really sometimes begin to feel like we are that character or we're walking alongside them. So, next time you meet somebody new or you visit a new place, which may be a while off in terms of foreign travel and stuff, but just to have that curiosity about like, what's it like where you live? What was it like growing up doing that? What's your job like? How does that feel to have gone through that? And being really interested in other people's lives, basically. So that number one tip is permission to be respectfully nosy, to increase empathy, because it helps us to get lots of different people's stories and really listen, and then we're able to think, like, that's so different to the way I grew up, or God, I didn't even know that happened, or I didn't know that culture did that. So curiosity is a brilliant gateway into empathy. And number two, which is a really beautiful one, which is particularly poignant at the moment, is to really look at challenging our prejudices and our differences with people, and being devoted to looking at what we've got in common. So not always thinking how we're different to someone, but thinking how we're alike. And one of the really lovely examples of this is, there was this guy, I don't remember his name. I'll put a link to the story in the notes below. But he basically was brought up and was in the Ku Klux Klan in America, and he had risen to like the higher ranks of the Ku Klux Klan. And then on the opposite side was a black rights activist who was very much against this view of white supremacy that the Ku Klux Klan have. And they came and had this debate, the two of them. And it ended up that through this debate that they actually realised that they both grew up in real poverty. There were a lot of issues of poverty in their upbringings, and that through them talking, and even though they were at complete opposite ends of the spectrum, they suddenly realised that they had this huge thing in common and many experiences in common. And through that, the Ku Klux Klan guy actually decided that he didn't want to do that anymore, and he sort of left the movement and became firm friends and kind of acquaintances with this person that on paper and initially they were up at loggerheads, and then they were able to open up through their similarities. So, particularly, social media and the internet thrives on people who have opposing views. And there's nothing wrong with having opposing views, but there is often far more that is similar about us than sets us apart. And that can be hard to remember at times. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, about developing that in one of the later tips, but I'd definitely say that trying to look at our similarities and being open-minded enough to realise that someone who we think we're going to hate, we might actually have more in common with than we think, and that might lead us to a new beautiful place. So that's number two. Number three is literally to walk in somebody else's shoes. So we talked about that earlier in the video. What can we do to really experience life like somebody else? It's all well and good saying, oh, what would it be like to have to live on a lot less money? And there are many TV shows where really rich people will go undercover and really experience what it's like to live in very different kinds of housing, not have money. And even if they only do that for a relatively short period of time, you can really see the impact that it has on them. And it doesn't have to be something so extreme that you're literally going to denounce all your possessions and go and live like somebody else, like George Orwell did for one of his books. You don't have to go and be homeless, but there are things that you can do to think, well, could I potentially just look at there's schemes in place where you can be homeless for a night just to experience what that's like, or even just to like sit on the ground for 5 minutes and talk to somebody who is homeless on the street and ask them if they're okay and if they need anything. Just that experience of sitting with them, and especially if it's cold and you just want to, your instincts like, I want to get away, I want to go inside, really to sit with them in that, even when it makes you feel uncomfortable. And the same when we're having a discussion with our partner, say, and they're talking about something that's really making us feel sad and it's very difficult to sit with them through that, that's when we really need to realise that there's gold there, if we can sit with that discomfort, because that's where often we get real breakthroughs and we're able to develop that empathy and have that empathic connection of really getting where somebody else is at, because we're sticking with them and we're riding those difficult emotions with them. So that's number 3. Number 4 is really listening and getting vulnerable. So we're all very distracted, me included, and to be truly empathic and in connection with someone, we have to get really present. And it's quite a skill. Like, even though it might look like you're not doing anything, you are doing a lot, especially if you're really actively listening and you're putting aside your life experience and saying, okay, I know that's there, but that's not important right now. I'm staying with this person. And it requires us to be really vulnerable as well. So we have to really listen. We have to take off our mask and get vulnerable with that other person. So that's really key to having an empathic connection. And it's not always easy. Like I say, it can be hard work. It's a bit like lifting those weights at the gym. You know, you get the results of that empathy, but sometimes you've got to lift the weights to do it. So number 5 tip is to take action and educate. So particularly important at the moment with the Black Lives Matter movement, really using the empathy that you've built within yourself as a ripple, and to be able to go out there and create a bigger movement, make a bigger ripple, educate yourself, develop empathic connections, hear people's stories, put yourself in their shoes, develop empathy, and then use that to share with other people. And one of the greatest things that we can do is embed this in our children, like we talked about before. A bit like learning a language, it's so much easier when we've got those beautiful little spongy childlike brains. So helping our children, if we're parents, to develop empathy, and you know, that can be done through so many different ways. So many different books out there now, from picture books from when kids are really tiny, and we can ask them questions like, oh, how do you think that made that little boy or girl feel, and what do you think they're going through, and can we picture what it's like to be there with them? So having these sorts of questions when you're working with children or you're being a parent can help them so much to make those seeds grow into little shoots of empathy much more. And number 6, so befriend the enemy. And I want to end on this because I think that it's the toughest but the most important right now. And that is, there is a lot of division on the surface. So there are lots of people who think black, another person thinks white. One person says yes, another person says no. So there's very on the surface of what we see online particularly, there's a lot of division. But what we have to be able to do to make empathy a really, you know, pivotal and effective part of society and part of our inner world and our relationships with other people is to work with the people we don't like. So I'm going to use the quintessential example of Donald Trump. There are many, many people in the world who do not like Donald Trump. And to take a character like that and say that you don't condone the things that they do that you disagree with, and you can recognise that there are many things that they do that you don't like, but by getting really angry and putting a wall up to that person, what does that achieve? What's the end goal? And if you perpetuate a cycle and post lots of things like that online and get everyone else involved, and what's it actually changing? What's it achieving? And there are always going to be people that we disagree with. And I think the important thing is to be able to go back to that first tip and be curious about, okay, I'm hearing that you really feel this way about this issue. Where does that come from? Like, when did that start for you? Being curious and asking them questions, being willing to really listen, not just asking them because you're doing it as some sort of intelligence exercise, but really being interested and asking them those questions. So if you can, that would be like my number one takeaway from the video, is to look at someone you really don't like and that really fires you up and you would see as an enemy, and think, can I offer them empathy? Can I find a way to be in empathic connection with them? And that's where the hardest work, but often the most valuable work that's really going to change things, is going to happen. And I think it needs to happen vitally, more than ever. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you feel like empathy is a little bit clearer now. I'm going to put some links below to further reading other videos that you could watch on empathy if it's a topic that you've really engaged with. And I shall see you all next week for another video. Thank you. Bye.